Our last panelist is James Carafano. He's one of the nation's leading experts in Homeland Security. He directs the Allison Center at the Heritage Foundation and is a 25-year veteran of the Army.
So I coordinate all the national security and foreign policy research and heritage, so it's basically all things bad. So people usually don't want to talk to me. This is amazing. This is more people than showed up at my wedding, so I'm very, very excited. I just want to frame what I want to tell you by telling you a very, very short story. It's about a young man named Tibor Rubin. He was a young Czechoslovakian Jew. His entire family was slaughtered in the Holocaust. And he would have died in the camps as well, except it was liberated by the American military. And Tibor had one thought, that if he survived the terrors of the privations of the post-war Europe, that he would come to America and he would become a G.I. Joe so he could get back to his country. So he came to America, couldn't get in the Army because he couldn't speak English very well. So he did what all enterprising immigrants do. He hired somebody else to take the English test for him. So he got in the Army just in time to go to the Korean War, where he was in the infantry, and he was wound up under a very anti-Semitic sergeant who thought there was no reason to send good Christian boys out to die when there's a dirty Jew that could do the job, and he was often sent out to do the most dangerous missions. He was eventually captured as a prisoner of war because of his incredible experiences in the camps. He not only knew how to deal with that, but he saved many lives and many other POWs. Most of his fellow soldiers had no idea he was alive. They discovered decades later that he hadn't died. And they also discovered that they had recommended him collectively 4 times for the Medal of Honor. But nobody knew that because the NCO had basically threw the paperwork away. And so they got together, and President George W. Bush awarded Tibor Rubin his Medal of Honor. He's an incredible American, and if you ever have a chance to meet him, it's an amazing experience to do that. So I tell you that because Tibor Rubin, he was a man of arms, he was a man of faith, and he was a man of family. And anybody who doesn't think that all these issues go together is just wrong. A lot of you probably know Jen Marshall. She works on a lot of the faith and family issues at the Heritage Foundation. She's always kidding me saying, Jim, it's your job to save the world. And I'm always telling her, Jen, yes, and it's your job to make the world worth saving. These issues are huge for me. 70% of the American youth who might potentially serve in the military are unqualified. They're unqualified because they're too fat. They're unqualified because they don't have an education, and they're unqualified morally, which means they have some kind of criminal conviction. These are all the product of failures of our families and of our faith. And if you think that this nation can survive and remain great, and that can be more Tibor Rubins or more people like the kids we have today, without the foundation of the issues that we care about here, then you're wrong. So your issues, they are my issues, and my issues are your issues. I want to talk about the greatest threat that we have to our nation today. And I say this in absolute seriousness and sincerity. And quite honestly, it's the Oval Office. And I'll just talk about 2 things. And the first one is these leaks, because these leaks say so much about the kind of leader that we have. And I know a lot of the press is about, well, this is just crass political pandering here, trying to pump them up, making them look. People have missed the big story, and I'm really surprised that nobody about this. Everybody has totally missed the really big story. We just celebrated the 60th anniversary of the Battle of Midway. The reason why we won that battle is because we broke the Japanese code. We held that secret for almost 29 years, along with many of the other big secrets of World War II that are called ultra secrets. Now we hold secrets with stopwatches. So what this tells you is this president feels comfortable that he can just open the playbook and let the enemy know what we're doing, because he has no respect for them, because he is the smartest guy in the room. And it's this kind of hubris which is the absolutely most dangerous thing to our future security. The notion that our enemies don't matter because I am so smart. I can sign treaties. I can talk to the enemy. I am smarter than everybody else. I can sit there with a play deck in my Oval Office and decide who wins and who dies. The notion that you can sit in the Oval Office and play Josiah Bartlett on West Wing and think that that's really presidential leadership, that is, to me, an incredible mark of how dangerous this situation is. And what really makes me worried, what really keeps me up at night, is not just who's in the Oval Office, But the safety net, when he fails, when we have to send our men and women out to defend us, to make up for the failures of his leadership, he is systematically destroying that safety net as we speak. I'm just going to mention very quickly, I thought it was very cool, Army, Navy, Air Force, plaudits to the conference organizers. So I just want to mention 3 things very quickly. On heritage.org, we did 3 different videos, and they're actually one for each of the services. One of them is about Tom Shanahan, who was a captain in the 1970s, refused to take his ship to sea because he said it was not prepared to go to sea. It was too dangerous to take a ship to sea. It's under the presidency of Jimmy Carter, and it highlighted how the military had sunk, the Navy had sunk, get it? How the readiness of the Navy had plummeted. And it finishes that video talking about, we just had a very similar situation with a U.S. ship, which has at 3 times failed to be able to go to sea because of its readiness. So we are on the cusp of a readiness failure in the Navy, and Admiral is exactly right. This is the smallest Navy since World War I, and you might say, well, what's the big deal? We have a much smaller Navy, but we have much more capable ships, and some of that's true. Unfortunately, the world is the same size. And even the world's finest ship can only be in one place at a time. So there's another video in there on the Air Force. It's about a great guy named Dave Deptula. Dave Deptula is a retired general. He was very excited. He was commissioned. He got to fly F-15s. It was the newest plane in the fleet. He thought that was really cool as a brand new second lieutenant. So he was recently, now he's retired, right? He was recently in the Middle East visiting his son, who is flying F-15s. And not just F-15s. His son is flying the exact same F-15 that Second Lieutenant Dave Deptula found when he was commissioned. This plane is still flying. I mean, and this is the oldest Air Force that we have ever had in the history of the U.S. Air Force. So the third video, which you can see on the website, is by a colonel named Kerry Kajikian. Kerry was a colonel that was sent to Iraq. When he got there, the good news was that they didn't have any combat vehicles for him. That was the good news. The bad news is they didn't have any vehicles for him. So they had to go out and buy their vehicles. So they actually went out and bought commercial vehicles because that was all they had. And they didn't, of course, they're not armored, so they took their body armor off and they duct taped their body armor to the side of the truck. So they had some kind of protection. Now, this is not George Bush's fault. This is the fault because of a decade before that. We did nothing. We just let our military start to atrophy. We are going to have a military under President Obama that's smaller than the military we had on 9/11. We are going right back to the days of unpreparedness under Clinton, and we're going even further back to the drastic days of a hollow military under President Carter. That's the future that we face. So these are not my issues. These are our issues that we have to address, and we have to address all these issues together. We here and these great veterans are going to fight for that, and I know you will as well. Thank you so much for coming and listening to us.